the wine program. This is my channel and podcast about what every waiter, waitress, line cook, and restaurant manager needs to know about wine. Today is part 2 of winemaking and the many choices facing the winemaker. If you missed part 1 of the winemaking episode, you should stop and watch it right here. Go watch it. I'll be waiting. Hey, welcome back. Pretty good, huh? Today we're going to talk about how this Pinot Noir from the Sonoma Coast of California is made. I've got the Rain 2017 Sonoma Coast Royal St. Robert Cuvée. The other wine here, this is the Chris Pinot Grigio. This wine is from Friuli, Venezia Giulia, which is in like the northeastern corner of Italy. They're kind of most famous for their white wines up there. In particular, obviously, Pinot Grigio is a big moneymaker for them. Now, the first step of winemaking is to create a must, okay? So you must create a must. And what is a must? Well, must is freshly crushed grapes, including the skins, seeds, stems, and pulp of the grape cluster. The juice portion of the must is called juice, but the solid portion of the must is called pomace. And the pomace can be up to 25% of the total weight of the must. Now, the principal difference between making white wine and red wine is that you separate the juice from the pomace. So let's start with the Pinot Grigio. First, the grapes are going to come in from the vineyard, and in this case, the case of the white wine, those grapes are going to be destemmed and crushed in a crusher destemmer. Then those grapes will be put into a press, a bladder press or a pneumatic press that will gently squeeze the juice out of the grapes. And that juice is going to be separated from the skins and seeds right away. It's going to be put into a clarifying tank that will allow any solid materials to fall to the bottom of the tank. It's not a filtration process, it's just a clarifying process, meaning we're going to let all the solid materials settle, and then we're going to rack the wine off the top of those solid materials. Now, racking is just wine speak for moving wine from tank to tank or barrel to barrel, and in many cases leaving the remains, the debris, the muck at the bottom of the other tank or barrel. Sounds like a medieval term. I'm not exactly sure what it means, but it's obviously nice jargon. It's good to know what the terminologies are in case you meet somebody. You could be like, yeah, racking, and they're going to be like, yeah, racking. Yeah, I know what racking is, okay? If it's time for the primary fermentation, I say primary because some wines go through more than one fermentation. You can do your primary fermentation in big oak barrels, small oak barrels, stainless steel tanks, clay vessels, cement, glass, plastic, a bucket, whatever. But remember, if you want to make a crisp, mouth-watering wine, you're going to choose stainless steel fermenters with a closed top and a valve that will allow that CO2 to escape without letting the oxygen in. Because as you remember, fermentation, as we know, is yeast eating sugar, excreting alcohol, and emitting gas. Now, this wine was fermented in stainless steel for 6 to 10 days between 68 and 71 degrees. Why stainless steel? Because stainless steel is non-permeable, meaning there's no oxygen transfer in and out of that steel. Conversely, when it comes to the red wines are typically fermented with the pomace because they need that skin contact, right? So that's why this wine is red. This Pinot Noir will either be destemmed or not. This wine was not destemmed. It was whole cluster fermented. Why? What do the stems add? When the stems are green, they can add astringency, and it can be kind of unpleasant. But when they get brown and toasty, ideally late into the growing season, they can add really pretty aromatic flavors as well as tannins and body and structure. Now, if the winemaker wanted to make a wine that's more fruit forward and with less acid, they may choose to destem. Again, it's a choice. In this case, these guys did whole cluster fermentation with the stems. In regard to fermentation, these guys say that they did a native fermentation. That means that the yeast that they used to ferment this wine occurred naturally in the vineyard. And the yeast is flying around, it's a living organism, it's forming on the grapes, it's sticking to the natural sugars, and when you start to crush these grapes, fermentation will naturally begin. Again, all these yeasts have their own flavor that are specific to different plots of land, different terroirs. And they want to ferment native because that is more of an expression of their 10 acres terroir. Now with this Pinot Grigio, they're bringing in this wine. These grapes are from 6 different areas. They're bringing them all into the same winery, and they want consistency of flavor. So they're probably inoculating. And again, when we talk about inoculating, we're talking about taking a bag of commercially purchased yeast, opening it and dumping it in the fermentation tanks. So this is going to have uniformity of whatever they make, 10, 20,000 cases of this wine. And then this is going to be done in a native way because they're maybe only making 300 cases of this wine. You see the principal difference? But again, the terroir episode, very, very important. Again, you could link to that here. Now again, unlike the Pinot Grigio, this juice will not be separated from the rest of the solid materials. Also, unlike the white wine, this wine was probably fermented in open top fermenters, not covered, either big oak barrels or stainless steel with an open top. Why? Because that's a little bit more oxidative, because oak allows for oxygen transfer and an open top fermenter allows gas to escape and oxygen to enter. And also, you need oxygen during the fermentation process to a certain degree so your yeast can prosper. Your yeast are living, right? So they need oxygen so they can multiply and do the job of the fermentation. Now, during fermentation, a cap will form. And the cap is the floating island of pulp, stems and seeds and skins that will float in the fermentation tank. You could think of the cap as like a giant tea bag floating in a pot of hot water. It's providing all the flavor, color, and acid that make the wine interesting. So this process of keeping the juice in contact with all the skins and seeds and pulp is called maceration or extraction, meaning we're extracting flavor and color from all these solid materials. Just like tea leaves, right? The longer you leave the tea leaves in the hot water, the darker the tea will get. But again, it's a balancing act. You don't want to overbrew your tea because guess what? Then it gets too tannic, too astringent, and tastes bitter. So you want to find that sweet spot. Again, balance, right? So how do you extract or macerate? Well, there's a couple of ways that I know of. Punching down or pumping over the cap, either mechanically or manually. So what are they? Well, punching down the cap is what it sounds like. You go up there and you will manually beat the cap up with a board or a mechanical arm, and you're gonna recirculate those tea leaves, if you will, or that cap throughout the wine, pulling out color and flavor and tannins and textures, etc., etc. Now, there's another way you could do it, and that's with a pump. You attach a pump with a hose to the bottom of the fermentation tank, and you pump wine over the top, and you pump the wine back onto the top of the cap, and you're basically circulating the wine through. The pros of punching down are it's a more artisanal sounding, it's a good selling point, it gives you that air of artisan craftsmanship, hands-on winemaking. The pros of pumping wine is that it's a hell of a lot easier. You know, you're not going to be out there standing on a board and fall in the fermentation tank ideally, but a lot of people think that pumping wine is too brutal. Some people don't like to force their wine through a hose. They think it can damage the wine. Now, I'm going to say that this rain is only moderately extracted because it's still pretty bright and fresh. It's not dark and brooding. You could read your laptop or your newspaper through the wine. Or some people will say a restrained style. And when I say restrained, I kind of compare it to yoga. You want to get a deep stretch, you want to get an effective stretch, but you don't want to exert so much power that you fall over, right? You want to keep your balance. And then there's also barrel fermentation, and that simply means that the primary fermentation is done in oak barrels. There's going to be a lot more oxygen transfer through the oak because oak is porous. It's also going to have a lot more oaky flavor if you're using new oak especially. Again, it's more of an oxidative method, and some people would say a little bit more manipulative because you're adding oak flavor just by nature of the fermentation, okay? There's one more aspect to fermentation, and it's a secondary fermentation, and it's called malolactic fermentation, or ML for short. So ML transforms crisp, sharp malic acid, like in a green apple, into a softer, creamier lactic acid, like in milk. ML occurs naturally in most red wines and a select few white wines, mostly, like I said, in Chardonnay. If they want to get that buttery richness, they're going to definitely malolactic the crap out of that wine. Winemakers will sometimes stop malolactic to keep that tart acidity, like in this Pinot Grigio, okay? So you can stop it, or partially mallow it, or fully mallow it. Again, it's all a choice. All right, now that's it for this piece. Correct. Now that's a lot of information, right? We're talking about green apples and stems and berries and punching down and pumping over and teabagging. It sounds like a wine porno up in here, right? But it's what you need to know. So come back. We're going to talk about aging the wine, filtering or not filtering the wine, and different types of closures. Meanwhile, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the wine program. Again, it's not what you know, it's what you need to know. Adios and peace, guys. Come right back. Peace.